Jen Fisher, I feel like I am a teenage girl going to a Justin Bieber concert. That's how I feel about you.
Come on. Come
I am
on.
so
Thank
happy to
you.
have you here.
Thank you.
And my girl, I don't think I ever even shared this with you. This speaks to the power of putting your content out into the world and having enough courage to do it. I have been following you for years. I have been touched and moved and loved your content. And I had this whole moment of she is going to be my friend and I am going to get to know her. And here we are years later, and I can call you a friend. And it just makes me think about the power of just like setting the intention. And
Mm,
do you believe in the whole concept of visualization? Where are you with that?
I definitely believe in it. I do. And I absolutely believe in it. I would say that there are times where I'm much better at it than others, depending on what other noise is going on in my brain. But I believe in it for sure. And it's an honor to be your friend and to be in your world.
Ditto. Ditto. I want to share with our listeners because I feel like it deserves a moment of airtime. And you and I have had talked about this is women empowering women.
Mm.
And we hear this word all the time and it loses its weight and its validity. But there's just something so powerful. Like you had said something to me in an email the other night, and I didn't get a chance to tell you this. You ended it with, I got you. And it made me feel so relief, like I could exhale.
Mm.
When you hear the word women empowering women, what does that mean to you? And how can the woman listening who's so caught up in the pings and the dings and all the things, how can she get out of her own way and begin to build a tribe of women around her that supports her?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it took me a long time to learn, and maybe
Mhm.
I'm still learning it. But I think we perceive that we live in this world of scarcity, right? That if you are somehow successful or you achieve or attain something, that somehow means that I can't or I won't or there's not enough room or enough space for me. And I have certainly felt that throughout my life and my career, and I don't know exactly what the turning point was. I mean, I think I just got so tired of seeing women tear each other down or
Mm,
kind of be in the middle of that, and in some cases being on the receiving end of that I was just like, okay, I'm not gonna, like, not only am I gonna not like sit by and not say something, I need to use my voice to start promoting and celebrating other women and celebrating what I admire about them and what I see in them that maybe I don't see in myself that I aspire to be. And so I think for me it probably came about as like just like personal personal experiences, but also just we live in such a polarized world and there's
mm,
enough room and enough space for all of us. And I think, Megan, especially in the world that we live in, I mean, we're truly like we're trying to change beliefs and behaviors and norms and things that have existed in society and workplaces for so long that it can't just be one of us. I mean, it needs to be an entire army of us, right? Like banded together, beating the drum nonstop until change is made. And so for me, that is, I guess that's why I do what I do. I am also a huge fan, admirer, and friend of Erin Gallagher, and she is the one credited with starting the Hype Woman movement. If you don't follow her, follow her. She's incredible, and like she's the biggest hype woman that I know. And so when you talk about like other women that you admire that inspire you, when I see the way that she holds up and inspires other women, it just inspires me to do the same. And it's so cool that it's become this movement because I think there's so many of us that have experienced quite the opposite. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about experienced it 10 years ago. I'm talking about experienced it 10 days ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The mean girl syndrome, it still exists. It's
Yeah.
still a thing. And
Yeah.
Jen, it makes me think as you're talking and you're sharing, about hype women, and I love that. I love that phrase. It just makes me think about you have to put out what you want to get back.
Hmm.
And I think that and this is one of the things I love about you so much, one of the many, is that you are consistently cheering for others in a very authentic place,
Thank
not
you.
coming from a place of what can I get, but I really want to support you. And I guess the whole reason I bring that up is I would arm the listeners or ask the listeners, when someone posts something and it moves you, tell them.
Hmm.
Tell them, because we have a tendency to believe that, either everyone's got it figured out or they got hype, look at all their likes, but it matters. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
would you agree?
I do agree. I mean, we live in this world that is ever increasing, digital, and social is a huge part of that. And it's become a huge part of kind of influencing our beliefs and our behaviors for the good and unfortunately for the bad, right? But I think that um there is a world that can exist where social media and social support and social celebration is the norm and not the
Mm,
exception. Um, and I mean, so yes, I think it kind of goes along the same lines. We've all kind of heard that saying of like, if you're thinking about somebody, tell them. If you miss somebody, tell them. If you love somebody, tell them. Like, don't wait. Life is too short. And so, if we're specifically talking about social, yeah, like if somebody posts something that mattered to you, that moves you, that means something to you. I mean, for me, it's really interesting because when I do get that feedback, I think a lot of people don't expect me to reply.
yes.
And it's really important to me. And sometimes that's really hard because I fight against kind of my own internal boundaries around like how much time I spend on social and what I do on social and how I engage on social, but like when somebody takes the time to tell you that you touched them in some way, or something you did or something that you said meant something to them, or made them think about something differently, or made them feel seen or heard. To me, that's so important to respond to, reply to in a very authentic way. And it doesn't mean that it takes a lot of time. It just means, saying, acknowledging it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
saying thank you and showing gratitude. I mean, we all know the science behind gratitude and how incredibly important it is. And I'm a huge believer in gratitude. So that's really important to me. I know it's hard sometimes because I look at the time of that on my phone of how much time I've spent on my on my social media apps, and I'm like, okay, I'm way over this week. So I kind of have this whole internal battle going on, but I do think that that's what creates the momentum. That's what creates the connection, and I do think that we live in an increasingly digital world and it's not going away anytime soon. And so we have to find ways to continue to use it to enhance who we are as human beings. And I think that that's a really good use case for it.
Jen, you are taking me to church, girl. You have me at social celebration. Put that on a bumper sticker, t-shirt, fanny pack. I love that. And I want to stay on this digital world here for a second, because it just makes me flash. And you and I had talked about this, using our life lessons and
Mm,
putting content out into the world to support others. And when you do that, you then open yourself up to criticism. You open yourself up to the naysayers. And then also, too, I just think organically in our digital world, you become this, it's all about the likes. Did I get the likes? Did I not get the
mhm.
likes? And you're hitting the refresh. And this just happened to me today, Jen. I posted something and it got 0 likes. And I thought to myself, wait, was that wrong? And then I had this whole moment of, if it feels right to you, do it. It's not about the likes. How do
Oh, mine
we
mine is always there's something. It's never me. There's always something wrong with the program or the algorithm.
exactly? It wasn't the content. It
No,
wasn't the
exactly.
content. I want to hear from you, my friend. How do you not? let all of that get to you and get consumed and sucked in by the likes and the things and the comments. Do you have any intentional bumper lanes or anything that you do so you don't just get warped into it?
I mean, it's hard, right? Because if you're a human being, and especially if you're putting yourself out there in a way that is vulnerable,
Mhm.
I think it's natural to want to know that it's being received in the way that you intended it to be received. And um, when it's not, or when it doesn't resonate, it does impact you. But I think what I remind myself is that, I believe that I have an important message to share with the world. And I can't control the way the world receives it or doesn't receive it. And then I think, when it comes to social, I mean, when it comes to social media, it was a little tongue in cheek that when I said, it's the algorithms, or it's the app, or it's the program's fault, it's not my fault. I mean, I think there's some truth to that too, right? And so I don't think that, I think it's really important not to hang your hat on, a single post that didn't get likes or did get likes, or, and kind of look at the collection, right? Or the
Mm,
impact that the collection has made, but also more importantly, the impact that, I mean, I know we're talking about the digital world, but like we also have to pull ourselves out of that world, right? Because I mean, we're human beings. And so I think we can't allow ourselves and our self-worth to be defined by that. And if you're doing that, I think it is time to actually say, like, is it time for a social media break, or is it time for a reset here to really understand, my own self-worth, and that I am enough, and that I do have an impact on this world, and it doesn't have to be, through the content that I post, but I'm enough, and I matter even without the content that I post. And it's hard because we're human, right? And so when you put yourself out the vulnerably, you want that feedback. I think the really interesting thing is, like, also, I think when you're doing, I mean, this, Megan, like when you're doing presentations virtually versus in person, right? Like,
mm,
like for me, getting used to that during the pandemic, because you don't get, I mean, it's not like you and I talking right now where I can see your head nodding and your eyes. And I mean, when you're doing this for, a Zoom full of people, you don't always get the same level of
mm.
energy or feedback, and that doesn't mean that what you're saying didn't resonate. And so I think I mean, I just remind myself that, hey, even if I, impacted one person, even if what I said mattered to one person and changed their view, or made their day a little bit better, or helped them think about something differently, or help them not feel alone, then that's enough.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be 1,000 people. One person is enough.
mm. Oh my God, I just love you so much. I love how you said it's not to me how the world receives it. And I think
Yeah.
there's something so freeing about that. I want to talk about you've been such a huge advocate in posting on this and sharing this out into the world. And I love it. This whole loneliness epidemic that we're
Mm.
in. I've been so intrigued about but what you've been sharing. Head down, we're in the screen, phone, laptop, phone, that we don't even realize how much we're missing this social connection. Share with our tribe this whole loneliness epidemic, what you found about it, where we are, and what's missing in our lives and how we can get that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the research is really interesting, because I do think that if you go back prior to the pandemic, which feels like a lifetime ago, I think that loneliness was an epidemic back then too. I think what the pandemic did was, well, first of all, it made it worse, but second of all, shined a big bright light on it, and in some way exposed all of us to say, wow, we're all susceptible to, feeling lonely and experiencing loneliness. And that's part of the human condition. And because so much about our lives was stripped away from us literally overnight, and at first we thought that, oh, well, it's no problem. We have all of these digital tools that will keep us connected. And we
Mhm.
didn't think it was going to last as long as it did. And then everybody started getting Zoom fatigue. And then there was kind of this recognition of, yes, it's great that we have technology that allows you and I to see each other, but it's never, ever, ever going to be a replacement for you and I seeing each other in real life. So I
Mhm.
think the role that technology needs to play in our lives when it comes to social connection and loneliness is that it enhances or augments in person, in real life connection. But loneliness is a real issue, because I think that we have been led to believe that digital connection is real connection, and it's not real connection. It's just that it can't replace
Mm.
in-person connection. So there's digital connection and then there's in-person. And I think they need to live together, and that they enhance and augment each other. But you're right. I mean, we spend so much time on our screens. My husband and I often talk about, we have a 3-year-old Jack Russell Terrier who is very active. And so between my husband and I, she goes on about 4 walks a day. And when we take her on walks, usually it's one of us. Sometimes we go together. But you look around and everybody is heads down on their phone. And like, if you say hello or smile to somebody because they happen to be looking up at you, they're almost surprised by the fact that you said hello. And it's kind of like, oh, wait, am I supposed to say something back to you? Made worse by the fact that we all have these in our ears all the time, right? And it's great if you're listening to a podcast or music or what. I mean, like, again, there's a time and a place for all of these things. But like, if we can't even walk around in everyday life without having our heads in our phones, I think that tells you that there's a real problem here. And humans were meant to connect. I mean, if you look at all the research, if you look at the research around longevity and lifespan and health span, and what creates a long meaningful life, it's the strength of our personal relationships.
Mhm.
And those personal relationships can't be digital. They just can't. I mean, we're not, thank goodness, we have not evolved to that point yet. And I hope that we never do.
As you're talking, it just makes me flash to all of these things in my own life. I mean, you're at the airport. No, there's a minute till the gate boards. People are head down to the phone, can't look at each other, can't talk to each other. And Jen, I just had this a couple months ago with Michael, my husband. Thank God he feels that he can share and talk to me about these things. He said, Meg, where are you at dinner? Like your body's here,
Mm,
but you're not here. And I thought to myself, oh my God, he's so right. Like my head is thinking about the pings and the dings, and then the phone's going off, and I'm thinking about, oh, let me write that down. Oh, I gotta send that real quick. Oh, I gotta do that thing. And just even putting that phone on do not disturb for 60 minutes so I could be present with the man that I love while the rest of the world had me all day was such a game changer.
yeah.
Jen, do you have any sort of air quote habits or bumper lanes or micro steps that you do in your life so you can allow yourself to be present, whether that's time with your dog or your honey or you, anything that you do or recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So, after watching your TED Talk, I mean, you didn't see me watching it, but I was like, uh-huh, uh-huh. There was a time in my life where I was so addicted to my digital device that my husband literally like had to like take it away from me, or like
Mm.
change the password, lock it up, like. And I swear to you, I had withdrawals. Like, people used to joke that I slept with my phone, and I would go along with it as a joke, but it wasn't a joke. It was real. Because somehow I thought that whatever was happening on my phone at 3 o'clock in the morning needed my attention.
Yeah.
And so, I am. I think I'm much different now. At least I don't sleep with my phone anymore. We can say that. And look, I think that this ebbs and flows, right? Because our technology is set up to I mean, that's the behavior they want. That's an attention economy, right? And so everything about the way technology is designed to not only get your attention but keep your attention. So for me, like sacred spaces are, exercise. So, at the gym, no, like phone is on do not disturb. And unless it's an emergency, someone in my family, no one else can break through. And I think that that's also something that everybody should utilize and learn. Like, you can put your phone on do not disturb, but also, like, if you are a caregiver for a family member, like I am for my mother who has Alzheimer's, I make sure that the people that might be contacting me regarding her care, they can break through on do not disturb. And there's all kinds of like cool settings that you can use to do this for yourself. They don't want you to know about it. It's there, but they don't advertise
Right, right. And Jen, I
it.
loved when you said ebbs and flows. The longest relationship that you ever have in life, we've heard it before, but it is so true, is the one with yourself.
Yeah.
So, like, you gotta then these things don't just happen like this. Like in our
Right.
quick world, we want the change like this. We want an app to fix it. And I just, when you said the ebbs and flows, it just made me think that's it. It's all about the journey. And speaking of journey, I want you to take our listeners through your journey. When I think of burnout, I think
Mm.
of you as the pioneer
I
speaking on it. And
don't know if that's a good thing.
it is a good thing, girl. And listen, I'm standing right behind you, pushing you along. Say, preach, Jen, and so many others, so many others. And I would venture to say that you didn't think to yourself, you know what, I'm going to speak on burnout. Like there must have been a journey and a life experience that got you here to find your passion and your purpose. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah. Yeah. But one thing I want to circle back to is, so
Yeah.
the technology, like use the technology, make the technology tools work for you. Right now, you
Mm,
probably work for the technology. So the gym for me, obviously before bedtime, all that kind of stuff, like no phones, no TVs, no screens of any kind. And so, those are kind of some of my digital boundaries. In terms of burnout, I, I touched on it before. I think there's many factors that led to my burnout, but certainly the way I was living my life and the choices that I was making in my life. And so my days looked like, I prided myself on getting to the gym for an hour a day. And to me, in my mind, that meant I was healthy and well.
mm,
And I was probably sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. And I mean, I was working or doing something with all the other hours of the day. But I didn't even think about sleep as like, I mean, I was kind of this mindset that like I'll sleep when I'm dead. And if you read Matthew Walker's book, like the first like four sentences of the book, he basically says the if you don't get this much sleep, you're going to die sooner. And so, I wasn't that far off, right? I was going to sleep when I was dead, and I was going to get there a lot faster if I kept living that life. The truth is that life isn't sustainable, and no matter how hard I fought it, because it was almost 9 years ago, and so it wasn't during a time where we were talking about burnout in the way that
mm,
we are now. And I mean, I
mhm,
think that there's good and bad, right? We're talking about burnout a lot more, and that's really good. We're talking about burnout a lot more now because I think that it is happening a lot more now.
mm,
And not
mhm,
that it wasn't happening back then, but I just think it's a lot more prevalent than it is. It's a lot more prevalent now, and I think we have different permissions. And so it's interesting when I decided to talk about it. I had an incredible leader that who's a friend and a mentor. She no longer works at the same organization that I do, but she was the one who kind of said to me, like, hey, I got you, like what I said to you, Megan. She's like, I've got you, but you need to take some time off. Because for me, I processed I mean, I looked around and everybody's like, a-okay, we're all so good at showing up like
mm,
nothing's wrong. And so I processed, I knew there was something wrong, but I was like, I can't tell anyone. I can't ask for help because they're going to think that I can't cut it, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough. And so for me, I processed it as failure. I processed it as there's something wrong with me. And if I don't figure this out, they're going to figure me out and they're going to know that I don't belong here. And so I just kind of kept saying, I'll rest when, or I'll do this when, or and you know, when never comes. And then finally your body and your brain are like, okay, idiot, if you're not going to do something about it, we're going to do it for you. And so that was kind of my story. And I was forced to take a leave of absence in many ways. And I had this incredible leader and mentor who was like, you like, you got to go. But it wasn't just you got to go, it was you got to go, and I've got you. Like, you've given so much that it is now time to focus on yourself. And even that, I will tell you, Megan, I was like, okay, like, what's wrong with her? Like, I don't like I didn't trust her. I was like, okay, why does she want me to take, like, I mean, I was in such a place of like burnout and scarcity and all that kind of stuff that I thought that it was, I even viewed it, and I wouldn't say as punishment, but like, okay, what's really going on here? Now I
Mm,
look back at it and I'm like, that was the greatest gift somebody could ever given me, to say, hey, like, you just need some time here,
mm-hmm.
to figure yourself out. And so, long way of saying that when I first decided to talk about it, it's this same leader and friend. I don't know why in the world we decided we would write co-author an article for Harvard Business Review on what leaders can do to help their teams and their colleagues with burnout. And so here we are sharing my story of burnout and, like, struggling with my mental health, because I was also diagnosed with anxiety and depression, which we probably know more now that a lot of the same symptoms of burnout look a lot like anxiety and depression. But I am somebody that lives with anxiety 24 hours a day. Yeah, exactly. We've talked about that. And so, like, I didn't baby step it. And I guess if I think about my life, there's not a lot of things that, like, not a lot of the big things that I've done in my life, I haven't really baby stepped them. And so I don't know why I thought this one would be really different, but we decided to write this article. And I remember the morning that it published, I absolutely freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I called up our communications team. I was like, please tell Harvard Business Review to take it down. I don't want it out there. But I will tell you that very shortly after that, talking about kind of reinforcement and feedback and things like that, I started to get an outpouring of messages either on LinkedIn or through my email, just in any way that anybody could reach out to me, and said, thank you for sharing, and then proceeded to tell me their story.
Mm,
And so then I was just kind of like, okay, so that now this is a thing. Like, this is the thing that I'm gonna start talking about. And so I think that goes back to the prior conversation, Megan, is that, like, when you do put yourself out there, it's really scary. And so, um, for those listening, like, even if it doesn't resonate with, like, your exact experience, and maybe it is why I do what I do, because I think it's so important to tell people, like, hey, I see you, I hear you,
mm,
and I understand you. And so maybe you've never experienced burnout, but I'm, like, I want you to know that I'm here for you, type of thing. And so I think maybe if we can approach the world a little bit differently, as opposed to kind of this singular point of view of like, oh, well, I've never had that experience, so therefore I'm not going to comment or share, or maybe I don't feel comfortable. I mean, I think when it comes to mental health too, a lot of the things that I hear from people is like, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm like, you're not going to say the wrong thing if you say something that's compassionate. Like,
mm,
it's not possible, right? Like, I mean,
mm-hmm,
just be a nice person, be kind, say, hey, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you, is there anything I can do? You're never going to say the wrong thing when you say that. It's just not
mm.
possible.
I Oh, I love that story. And it makes me flash to, we are so hungry to find our purpose. Like it's something you can find on an Amazon digital shelf, right? That you can just search for it, find it, and get it. And you don't find your purpose finds you. And that
Hmm.
was one of the things I took away from your story, is that your purpose found you. And then the other thing I got, Jen, from that is it made me flash to what you and I have been talking about, this vulnerability hangover. This when you expose yourself and that mask comes down, man, and it is out in the world in a very public way. We love to glamorize vulnerability. Hashtag vulnerability is strength. And it is, but it does
Hmm.
not feel comfortable in the moment. But the more you sit in it, the more your people will find you. And I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, Jen, as someone who just did their TED talk, and we will link it in the show notes when it comes out. Do you feel that that was your most vulnerable moment to date? And how did you handle that? Or do you think it was the Harvard Business Review article that was your most vulnerable and real moment to date?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I don't like I don't I don't know if I think because my TED Talk hasn't published yet,
Mm,
maybe I don't. I mean, yes, it was very vulnerable, but I also think that for me, by the time I got to my TED Talk, had I had shared a lot of my story in different ways and not in, not kind of all together in the way that I did in my TED Talk and those types of things. And so I think the thing for me with the TED Talk was this kind of goes back to like when I decide to do something, I don't tend to baby step it, but a
love
lot
that
of
about you.
my like if you would ask, like if you ask me today, like what's your biggest fear in life, I will tell you public speaking, and people are like,
Really?
no, it's not. See, that's the exact that's the exact reaction that people have because I do it a lot. And like you could never tell, but right now I keep getting a high heart rate alert on my Apple Watch. And it's just me and you having a conversation. And so I have learned how to, I mean, it used to paralyze me. Like it literally used to paralyze me. Now I've learned how to kind of use that anxiety to propel to create energy, right? Like the kind of the other side of anxiety, like what Brené Brown talks about, like the opposing emotions, right? So I've learned to use that anxiety to kind of propel me and to give me energy for the public speaking. And so all of the majority of public speaking I've done prior to the TED Talk was fireside chats and
Mm-hmm.
panels and things like what we're doing. And that's my preference, just because I feel like it's a lot more personal and
Mm-hmm.
personable. I didn't do a lot of keynote speeches. So for me, like that TED Talk stage was really my very first like keynote keynote speech. And so of course I decided to do a TED Talk because,
Go big or go home, babe. Go big or go home.
because why not? And so I think for me that moment, it felt less vulnerable in terms of the story that I was telling, and much more vulnerable of like, okay, I kind of picked one of like the most, I don't know that it's the biggest stage in the world, but there's going to be a lot of eyes on this. And so like if I screw it up, like, and so I think that's kind of what I was carrying with me. I do think that when it publishes and there's a lot more eyes on it and people are watching the video, and I also understand that, like, which I haven't had this experience yet, you probably have, is like for me the TED audiences are amazing, right? Like they're, I mean, talk about being present. There's
Mm.
not a phone out anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are engaged, they're cheering you on, and so you do feed off of that energy, and you do get that immediate feedback. And so I think that, after the first kind of few times where the audience engaged or laughed, like I settled in. And I understand, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, is like when you watch the video, like you don't get that same, like it's a very different experience than the one that you actually had in person. And also it's just really weird watching yourself on video and listening to yourself. Like it's just a weird experience.
Oh God, yeah. And I was so happy, talk about universal moment, that you and I had connected before the talk came out, and a mutual friend of ours, shout out Karen Eber, had said to you, Jen, listen, when it comes out, it's gonna feel different.
Yeah.
And it did. And I
Yeah.
will tell you, Jen, I wanted to, and I was just sitting in the living room watching it with my husband and my parents. Talk about like a trusted tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And for that 15 minutes, Jen, I wanted to throw up. And actually long afterwards, I wanted to throw up. I wanted to crawl into a hole. I wanted to run away. I couldn't even talk about the talk
Yeah.
afterwards. And I criticized myself every bit of the way. And I thought to myself, this is what a vulnerability hangover is now.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Jen, you said something so beautiful. Well, you said a lot of beautiful things, but I wrote this
Thank you.
down because it spoke to me when you were talking about, listen, the TED Talk was my first big keynote. And I said, go big or go home. You said, why not? Why not? And it just makes me think of why not you?
Yeah.
And for the listener, I feel like we could all write the same memoir by the time we're 40, 30, 50, doesn't matter the age, but that we could all write the same thing, which is, I thought my life was meant for more. And it's easy to numb it and it's easy to run away from it and it's easy to push it down. But for our listener, Jen, that is having that same thought that feels that everyone else has it together. They think their life's meant for more. They don't know where to start. They're exhausted. They're going through the motions. What's one micro step that you would recommend that they do? One small thing.
Mm.
Go from existing to living, to wanting to be a part of their life again, to listen to that inner gut whisper.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think, reflecting on what is that one thing or that one time that you remember being fully engaged or
Mm,
fully alive, and who were you with and what were you doing? And maybe not a micro step or in the moment, I think that the recalling of that can certainly create a boost in all the good feel good hormones and your energy and stuff like that. But I would say to take that one step further and think about how you can recreate those moments in your life. Um, but it's hard. I mean, this is, that being in that place and in that space is hard. And so I think that the main thing I would do is don't do it alone. Talk to
mm,
somebody, whether that's a friend or a partner or a therapist or but don't try to sort through all of that alone, because number one, you don't have to. You aren't alone, and number two, I think sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of that space completely by yourself. I mean, I think this is one of the things, Megan, you and I have talked about. And Shelley Tygelski was the first one that I really heard say this about self-care, that self-care, it's kind of a misnomer, right? Because self-care leads you to believe that, like it's all about you and you're caring for yourself, but none of us can actually care for ourselves by ourselves, right? Like
mm,
we need other people to actually practice self-care, whether that is like we need a supportive spouse or partner or family that's going to create the space to let us go do what we want to do, whether that be yoga class or hang out with friends, that that you need that support system. We all need that support system to care for ourselves. And so it's not ever really like self-care for myself by myself.
mm.
But that self-care actually requires that community. And I think that if you're in that space or in that place, recognizing that you probably can't get out of it alone, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that you shouldn't be afraid to reach out and ask others for help or to talk to others about what you're thinking or feeling or experiencing.
I love that. You can't care for yourself by yourself. Oh, another tweetable moment, my friend. I want to go back to that conversation that you had with the beautiful mentor that you had in your life that helped you get on this journey. And it just makes me flash to what you and I have talked about. You're leading this whole initiative around it at Deloitte, which is human sustainability. And it makes me flash to this amazing, which guys, I'm going to link it in the show notes because it is so amazing. The survey that you just
Mm.
led and put out into the world. That guy she was just interviewed on Bloomberg about, go girl. And one of my biggest takeaways, I had many, and I love all the research in it, Jen, because this is not just woo woo, there's research to back it up, is that this lack of communication between C-suite and employees. And I want to look at my notes here because I don't want to jack up the stat. 84% of the C-suite say their company has made commitments. They're moving forward in wellness. Only 39% of the employees agree with that. So we still got a big gap to go. And one of the things that you beautifully talk about in this piece is that C-suite needs to be human too.
Mm-hmm.
What is your recommendation in a world where we have never been taught? Hell, we didn't even learn this at home to
Yep.
be vulnerable and honest. We didn't even learn how to have it with ourselves. How can we start to have that in the workplace? Any recommendations on where we just start to have these human first conversations?
Yeah. Well, first, watch my TED Talk when it comes out because I talk about I look, I think you are exactly right that the majority of us, and that is inclusive of, leaders in very senior roles for much of our lives. I mean, we were told, that there's no, work is not a place for emotions, check your emotions at the door, especially if, I mean, and it goes both ways, right? Like, especially check your emotions at the door if you're a man, because men can't feel anything. And then for women, it's like, oh, she's too emotional, right? Or she's too this, or she's too that. So it's kind of like nobody could win when it came to like emotions and vulnerability. So we were all just told to kind of stuff it, um, and now it's, we know that that's the absolute wrong thing, but it is still, I mean, we don't teach this in school, we don't teach this at home, and it is a skill set. It is truly a skill set. There is new research coming out of MIT that is around well-being intelligence, and it talks about well-being as a skill set, just like any other skill set that leaders need, or competencies that leaders need to have. We've also thought about these things more recently as soft skills, which drives me crazy because there's nothing soft about them. They're actually the hardest skills that you will have to learn. But because we call them soft skills, everybody kind of just goes, oh, like I'll get to those, right? Like they're not the primary skills that we need to be successful in our jobs. But more and more, the leader of now and the leader of the future needs to be a human leader. And especially with, AI and all of this stuff that we're hearing that AI is going to take everybody's jobs and all that, fear that is going on now. Being human is what makes you
Mm.
what makes you unique and makes you irreplaceable. It's also what makes people connect with you. And I think what happens in especially many large organizations is that the workforce of today is very different, and they want to know who a leader is and what they stand for and what matters to them. And I mean, when I was coming up in the workforce, I was you'd be lucky if I even knew who the CEO was, right? Like we didn't even know their names. But now somebody that just started at an organization yesterday knows the name, knows the names and wants to know who these leaders are. And they want to know what they stand for and what matters to them, because that matters to the workforce. They want to know that they're working, an organization is an inanimate object. It's made up of human beings. And so it's not, when we talk about like what an organization stands for, well, it's not really the organization, it's the people within the organization. What do they stand for? Who are they? What matters to them? And oh, by the way, we don't all have to agree.
Mhm.
We live in this world where it's like suddenly you have a different point of view than me, and now I can't ever talk to you again, and I demonize you. Like, why did we get there? Why are we there? Like it used to be that, like, oh, wait, you have a different point of view. Why don't you tell me about it? Maybe I can learn something from you. And oh, by the way, maybe I still won't agree with you, but we can still be friends. And so I think that we have lost our ability to, like, I mean, those are uniquely, that's what makes us uniquely human, right? Is to still have this ability to care for one another, but somehow we've lost that. and it spans beyond the workplace in my view. But I do think these human skills are these skills of right now. I mean, we talk about the future of work, but I don't know what that means, because like the future's a minute from now, right? Like so like when we talk about future work, like what are we actually talking about? Are we talking like 3 years from now? Are we talking about tomorrow? Are we talking 10 minutes from now? It's all the future. But I think the skill set of now is, like a really, I mean, leaders need to be human first and foremost. And I also think that leaders need to realize that being human doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you
Mm,
strong. Um,
mm,
and the workforce sees that and feels that, and so it's going to look different for everyone. Vulnerability looks different and feels different for everyone, but I do think that every leader needs to figure out what that looks like for them and show up in that way. And that's not easy to do, because we also don't reward people based on how they show up, or like how vulnerable they are or how human they are. We reward them on metrics that are quite the opposite. And so I think that that's a big influencer. I mean, you don't go to a shareholder meeting and tell everybody, like, oh, I was, 98% human today. You don't get rewarded based on that. And so I think that those are some of the systemic issues that we talk about in the paper, and in the research, that I'm not suggesting that we reward people based on how human they are, but we do need to take a good hard look at how we're measuring these things and what we're requiring from our leaders, and our colleagues alike, when it comes to truly caring for one another, because an organization is just made up of people, and we get to decide what that looks like.
mm. Jen, back to your earlier point, you can't care for yourself by yourself. Anyone that's listening, I want you to share this conversation with your colleagues, with your team, with those you work alongside, so you can begin to do the hardest thing there is to do. Have the conversation. Jen, you've taken me to church, girl. For our listeners that are salivating, like I am, want more of your content and your work, where can we follow you? Where can we get more of Jen Fisher?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Jen Fisher. On Instagram at Jenfish23. Same on Twitter, although I don't spend too much time on Twitter, so you're better off LinkedIn or Instagram. Also, you can buy and read the book that I co-authored with Ann Phillips called Work Better Together. I have my own podcast that's called Work Well, all one word, that you can find on any podcatcher. That, like Megan, I get to talk to really awesome people. I consider it my biweekly therapy session, because I
Mm.
get to talk to so many people that I admire and learn from. And then also my forthcoming TED Talk, which hopefully will be coming out in the next few weeks. And if you follow me on social, you will see me sharing that loud and proud, so you'll be able to see that as well.
Awesome. And guys, I'm going to link all of that in the show notes. I'm a huge listener of Jen's podcast, and it really is therapy. And it allows these conversations to happen that we never really thought of before. It provides language in a really authentic, vulnerable way. Jen Fisher, you are such a gift to this world. I feel so grateful to call you a friend, a hype woman. I love the beautiful, beautiful human that you are and the light that you give to this world. What a gift you are. Thank you for being here. I love
Thank
you
you.
so much, my friend.
Likewise. Thank you so much.